So Sean writes, what if you want to continue training for the rest of your life in terms of martial arts? Is it reasonable to join an MMA gym so that you can train BJJ and Muay Thai classes both? So there was a string of comments that went back and forth on one of the videos I uploaded. And so I just wanted to share some of the feedback as well as add some commentary to this video. So Sean, if you're watching this, I'm going to link you. Well, if you're watching this, that means I linked it. You saw my link in the comments section. But anyway, what I wanted to do is just kind of like let folks share in the conversation and discussion. But at the same time, it would also, I want to add some commentary because I think it's a great discussion. First of all, is it reasonable to join a MMA gym so that you can train both Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? And the answer, yeah, it's totally reasonable. Question of the gym or the academy or the dojo that you're joining is simply a question of whether or not their training methodology and the objectives and expectations they have for their students, does it match with what you have, your goals, and in terms of your goals and whatnot. That was the first comment response that I had, and then you replied back saying, thanks, and at MMA classes and BJJ classes, will you still be able to learn street-focused and in parentheses brutal techniques? Or will quote-unquote non-lethal techniques, i.e. sport techniques, will they do just fine? There are so many different opinions in martial arts universe about this stuff. It's honestly starting to stress me out. I totally get it and I totally understand. The thing that you want to be seeking is martial skills, right? You go train and you're trying to acquire skills. Now, generally speaking, in the area of personal development, doesn't matter what you're doing, whether it's martial arts, your career, art, craft, whatever it is, it always comes down to the idea of getting strong in something. And I love the analogy that, or rather, I call it an equation. Marcus Buckingham, if you haven't checked this author out, he's a great personal development author, worked for Gallup. But anyway, he talked about strengths essentially being it's a combination of understanding your own talents and layering on top of your talents knowledge and skills. Not just skills, but knowledge coupled with skills. The two are different. One is theoretical, one is book learning, one is information, and the other, skills, is actual technical ability, right? So you got to know what your talent, where your talents lay at, where you're naturally inclined towards. On top of that, layer knowledge and learning, and on top of that, layer technical skills. When you apply those technical skills, that knowledge, the theoretical stuff and information and whatnot, along with your talent behind it, get experience with that over time, that layering of one experience over the next, what we call, this is through pressure testing and seeing what works and what doesn't work for you. That becomes your individual strength. And so that's the thing that you want to be seeking in the space of martial arts training and learning. Specifically, if you're going to a dojo, the bigger, higher level goal is that you want to develop yourself. You want to develop your strength. But specifically within the breakdown of that, the key thing that you want to be seeking are martial skills, your technical skills and knowledge as well. Keep in mind, a lot of the book learning and stuff is not going to necessarily happen. The dojo, it depends, but 9 times out of 10 it's not going to happen. But you will be encouraged to go seek out those seminars, seek out those books, seek out those videos, watch, look up content, do additional learning and training. And so that way you get a better understanding, watch matches and things like that. That's all in the knowledge category, but then you still got to practice those skills. That's what the dojo is for. That's basically where you're workshopping, where you're engaging. So that's the thing that you want to be seeking. So that's kind of like what I want to expand on. You're seeking martial skills. You take somebody who is skilled, they will always trump somebody who's not skilled, right? This is the philosophy in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. is that you can take two people matched up. Somebody could be big, somebody can be strong, but they're completely unskilled. They will lose to a smaller, weaker, more frail individual, but has technical ability that is mapped to their, to their frame, that's mapped to their size and whatnot, because they're able to use that leverage to overcome somebody who's bigger and stronger. So now the thing is, the idea behind learning something that's quote unquote brutal techniques, right? Now, what's the difference between self-defense and sport? I'm going to get into that later. But I want to give you an example of, so a buddy of mine and we were sparring. And in that sparring session, he had me on, like, I think side control. And there's a video of this match, probably somewhere on this channel. But anyway, so what happened was he was trying to do a key lock on me, and so basically it was a shoulder lock. He didn't have my elbow in the right position to execute the submission, and so what I literally did was I grabbed his one pinky and I peeled his hand off of my arm and I got out of that. And then he's just like, yo bro, that's cheating.
But it's so effective.
It is.
That's dumb. I can't peel one finger.
No. That's how injuries happen, man.
Phew. Fine, you win.
Wasn't easy.
I'm like, what are you talking about? That's cheating. That's like, you had my hand and I got your hand off. I'm like, and I used, the appropriate leverage to break your grip. He's like, no, you can't do that because you'll get disqualified. I didn't get what he was talking about. I spoke with, one of the judo senseis, that I train with, as well as, the professor at the Jiu-Jitsu school. He's like, yeah, you know what? The reason is that when you're in sport, you can't be grabbing fingers, right? And that's simply a safety precaution, right? And the reason for that is because, like, let's say you're fighting, you grab somebody's finger, right? And and again, in self-defense, i.e. a brutal technique, is that you can grab two fingers, right? You can grab a pinky, and you can yank it and it'll hurt the individual and their grip will be broken, and that's for your safety. The thing is, that's easier to do. But when you learn a technical skill, i.e. how to appropriately break the grip without hurting the fingers, that doesn't necessarily negate the fact that you can't grab their fingers. You can still grab their fingers in a self-defense scenario, i.e. brutal. Now, but the thing is, there's rules in play in the sport so that people can can participate and engage in the sport long-term, years to come, with minimal injury. Obviously, it's a combat sport. There's always risk of injury, but at least you can continue for the long term. That's why in when it comes to like MMA, Muay Thai, if you're trying to compete in MMA and Muay Thai, there's gonna be a period at which point you can't do that anymore, because there's only so many blows that you can take right now, and that's why people retire from sport, even in Kyokushin karate, which is very similar to Muay Thai in terms of philosophy and training and conditioning and sport. And they've had Kyokushin karate practitioners, I'm talking about some of the old school stuff, face off against Muay Thai folks, and this is again a little bit of history. Maso Oyama, one of the founder of Kyokushin style of karate, he sent 3 of his best fighters to fight against some of the top fighters in Muay Thai. Out of those 3, 2 of them won. Right? Very similar techniques, very similar philosophies. But again, so the point was, it has to do with longevity, right? Like even in Kyokushin karate, it's only for so long that you could actually compete in that sport. But for a lifetime, you can still do the conditioning. Even in Muay Thai, you can still do the conditioning in terms of fitness, in terms of martial skill development. It's just that the level of pressure testing and sport competition that you can do, on a professional level, there's a limit to that. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there's a limit to that as well, right? In terms of but it's like that limit is significantly later. And this is one of the wonderful things about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, is that because there's not so much blunt force trauma, you're not getting punched in the face, you're not getting kicked in the head, you're not enduring, hard conditioned knuckle punches to your ribs, right? And so on. And because of that, it's like, if you know when to tap, you know how to escape, you know how to defend, you could do jiu-jitsu, for a really long time. So, but when it comes to the idea of brutal techniques, can you poke somebody in the eye? Can you kick them in the balls? Can you break their fingers? Yes, you can. That's not technical though, right? There's, it's real that kind of, anybody can do. But in fact, for you to defend against that, that would require a little bit of technical training and ability. So, and that's where a lot of the self-defense stuff comes into play. But again, it becomes a question of like, if you know the martial skills, the general principles that are applied, you will be able to apply that in the offense in a self-defense scenario, at least to my understanding. And you would also be able to defend against such attacks as well. So when I lived in Washington, D.C., I did Krav Maga training for a little bit. And the trainer was actually a D.C. Metro police officer. A big part of the training was also laying down realities of self-defense, right? Him being a police officer, him being called into scenarios a lot. He had a lot of case examples to cite as a lesson for us. Among the case examples that he would share is that 9 times out of 10, when it came to situations of street scenarios, it's like most of them could have been avoided, right? A lot of them, 9 times out of 10, you could have avoided them. Whether it's situations like bar fights and things like that, like a smart individual would not put themselves there. A smart individual would not engage in there. Somebody who is someone who promotes virtue and tries to suffocate vice in their life would not find themselves in those scenarios. So the issue of, having to defend yourself in a way that's violent or brutal, it's very minimal, highly unlikely, especially in a civilized situation today. It's not like back in the 70s of New York City, Harlem. And in fact, there's an article, if you look into I'll put a link in the description of this video, but highpercentagemartialarts.com, these guys, they do a lot of research and data in this area of sport, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and martial arts, and even self-defense. And one of the things is that if you're somebody who makes above 30 grand a year, just by that reality of alone, you've decreased the chances that you would suffer a situation where you would have to violently defend yourself, right? And so and that's like data. And if you want more details on that, just check out the link in the description below where I provided it. There's always the opportunity to de-escalate a situation in terms of fighting, right? If you find yourself in a situation that is potentially violent, well, 9 times out of 10, according to what the police officer is saying, was that it could have been avoided, right? And so, and if that, 1 out of 10, you could not avoid it, then understand that you're going to go to court, right? And that by itself, in terms of showing up to court fees, opportunity costs, all that, like just money value alone, that's $1,000 out of your pocket, minimum, right? And so, because if you find yourself in an altercation and police show up, you're going to court. You're going to get it. Like, that's a reality. So knowing this, right, it's a question, like, if you put a financial consequence to your actions, be like, oh, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't get into this fight. Maybe I should just walk away. Maybe I should try to de-escalate the situation. That's real self-defense right there, especially living here in the United States. It may be different in other parts of the world, but like my understanding is that you live in a first world situation. And so that's, you don't have to worry about that. So, and the last bit that I want to talk about is in terms of self-defense versus sport, right? The difference has to do with intent, really the goal, right? In a self-defense scenario, the goal is to keep what you have, is to survive, is to stay alive, is, that's the reality, right? In a sports scenario, is to be offensive, is to advance your position, is to make your opponent submit. And the key difference between self-defense and sport is that in self-defense, it is non-consensual fighting, right? You don't want to fight, but you have to fight because you have no other choice. Whereas in a sports scenario, it is consensual fighting. You're both agreeing to a set of rules of engagement, and at the same time, you're also agreeing to try to submit one another. And so that's the difference. But the skills, the martial skills that are applied in between the two scenarios are identical, if not the same, right? In terms of when it comes to grappling, when it comes to striking, when it comes to a takedown, right? These skills are more or less the same. And again, what I'm talking about here, conflict that is unarmed. It's the intent and the goal that's different. The skills are about the same. Now, there are schools that are purely sport and they drill home the rules and they have you work around the rules. Versus there are schools that are just, purely self-defense. But it's a question of now you got to understand the school that's purely self-defense. What's their training methodology? What are the instructors like? What's their background? And so like these are things that you have to kind of take into play and into consideration. Ultimately, it comes down to making a conscious effort to being safe, right? It's about like the philosophy or the mindset rather of, do you want to be a warrior in a garden or a gardener in a war, right? You take your pick. You replied back saying that, in other words, if I ever have to defend myself on the street, weaponless fight, Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai and Judo will do just fine. Thank you. And yes, there's a lot of self-defense McDojo nonsense out there. I worry. I currently train at one because one of my instructors tell me to use some kind of V block with my hand to block against a stick, then to rotate to a standing arm bar to get the stick out of their hand. I think it's unrealistic, but I'm not sure, as I like him as a person a lot. What makes something a McDojo or not, right? There are certain signals there, right? Among the signals are whether or not the progression in a system is based off of how much you pay. I mean, that's essentially like you pay, you get promoted, right? Also, it might just do with some weird stuff that they're teaching, whether it be like, mystical stuff that's probably not worth your time. But at the end of the day, when it comes to technique, though, you cannot necessarily discount a technique unless you've pressure tested it, right? Even in Jiu-Jitsu, there's a lot of techniques that, in fact, it won't work on the first time. It won't work on the 10th time. Heck, it might not even work on the 100th time. But you got to practice it and you got to drill it. And that's why martial arts is a technical field. You gotta train, you gotta drill. Now, there are certain basic movements that are innate that would allow you to defend yourself, yes. But there are certain executions that you have to do over and over again. A single leg takedown, a double leg takedown, right? Ipponsion nage, it's a judo throw. Fireman high crotch throw. To do an arm bar, right? To do a triangle choke. Even punching. Right? Punching and kicking, these are all technical moves. You got to practice them. You got to drill them, right? Heck, I couldn't throw a hook punch to save my life for the first 3 years of my martial arts training, right? It wasn't until Sensei, he took my belt off. He tied my arms from my elbows to my waist, and then he's like, now throw. Right? And that's when I started using my hips to throw punches. And that's when it comes down to the trainer and whether or not they're training you and to see whether or not something works. Now, when it comes to defense, you gotta also consider the school and the style that they're teaching. For example, if I were to learn knife defense and stick defense, I would want to go to Kali, right? And Kali is an entire system that's designed around using either knives or blunt objects, i.e. sticks, to be able to fight. So you got to also understand the style and the focus of that style. Now, your response was, thanks, I'm not sure what to call the system. We wear gis, but it's more like karate gis. Some are Jiu-Jitsu gis, and the belt rank is not like BJJ. There's more belts. There's no blue belt. We do BJJ on the ground, boxing and kicks for stand-up, and learn Muay Thai. We learn the Muay Thai clinch. We also do takedowns and throws. We do this in class listed as Jiu-Jitsu. I want to call it traditional Japanese, but it's not so fancy as it has a boxing type of strikes. Should I look elsewhere after I move if I want to learn the full art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Or are mixed systems okay? I'm confused as to why we learn mixed things in class instead of separate like BJJ class or Judo, for example. I'm just actually stressed about my journey. Now, to answer the first part, or I don't know what part it was, but let me answer the part about why don't we learn specific style versus having it all mixed. I'm all in favor of a mixed system if you're starting out. So I went to school that was branded as karate, right? They did Kyokushin karate on the foundation. And then they brought in Muay Thai techniques with some boxing strikes. And then they added grappling, which was a fusion between no-gi jiu-jitsu and Greco-Roman style wrestling. And so, but the thing is, they introduced these things like Kyokushin karate and kata and stuff, and nunchucks even. They would introduce that, but also a lot of self-defense within the beginner curriculum. And then in the intermediate curriculum, we brought in sparring, right? But Muay Thai style. right? With boxing, striking, and whatnot. And then later they brought in no-gi jiu-jitsu and grappling. Now, the thing is, that's the system that I grew up in. Now, when I left that school, after I got my black belt, moved out of town, whatnot, and I came back, and I noticed that, the school itself, as the public perception of martial arts changed, right? Because at the time when they started the school, karate was popular. Everybody knew karate. So that's why they were branded as karate. But then later, and the thing is, although I knew it as karate, but they were actually teaching mixed martial arts. And the reason was because it's effective, right? And that's why I'm for mixed systems. As long as, and in fact, I would say you may want to be wary of specific training unless that's your goal. You want to learn something specific. But if you want to learn self-defense, going into a mixed system is very good for you. You just want to put in the appropriate amount of time and know what your goal is, how much time you want to give to your goal, as well as understanding the expectation of the school itself, right? So, and every school and system has their own timeline of expectations. So that's the thing that you need to kind of get clear on. So, but the school that I went to, that I trained from initially and got my black belt from, they, like, the way that they do it now is that, they do jiu-jitsu, they do wrestling as separate classes, they do kickboxing as a separate class, and for the kids they have karate, so some of the foundational stuff is still there. So it's just a question of what is the objective and what's the goal that you have for yourself. When I moved out of New Jersey and I moved to DC, I had the foundations down essentially, right? And what I wanted to do was I wanted to train in a mixed system that would help me condition my techniques better. And I knew Krav Maga would be able to help me do that. And that's why I took up Krav Maga while I was in DC. When I moved down to Houston, I realized, the area in my martial arts training that needs the most work is grappling. And so I figured, okay, let me join a jiu-jitsu school specifically for me to strengthen that. And I also enjoy jiu-jitsu a lot, significantly more than the other forms of martial arts. Although I continue to train in those other forms because, just to stay up and, to make sure that my skills are as sharp as I can, while maintaining a regular daily life. If you don't have any martial skills or you have the basic martial skills, I'm all for a mixed system that allows you to learn the basics of, takedowns, learn the basics of grappling, learn the basics of striking, standing and on the ground. So this way you have the ability to defend. And if you want to participate in sports, you could also. However, at the same time, if you're like, I want to specifically learn Kali or I want to specifically learn Jiu-Jitsu, then go do that. That is just a question of what's your objective. Now, if you're thinking long term, I would say, hey, give yourself, 2, 3, maybe even 5 years in a mixed system, right? Get that covered. And once you've got a good rounding level of competency within the mixed system, then go specialize, then start focusing more. And again, I'm talking about this because that has been my experience and I'm grateful for that. So when it comes to your school, whether or not you want to continue at the school or if you move, do you want to pick up something else? It really comes down to what your goal is, right? At the same time, do you trust your teacher? Do you trust your school? Do you trust the institution and their training methodology? Do you understand what their expectations are in terms of your participation, time commitment, as well as potential timeline, right? In the sense of, like, if you put in a certain amount of time, you will most likely be able to get competent in certain areas. So, and what is it that you're looking for competency in? You're using the school as a vehicle to help you come closer to your goals, whose objectives may be a little bit different than what the school is. Again, it just really comes down to your personal preference, your personal goals. If you want to compete in jiu-jitsu, in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and you work in or you train in a mixed school, look to see if that school has competition opportunities within its network. If not, then maybe you want to change schools because you want to compete in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. If that's not the case, for me, before I landed at Gracie Barra, where I'm at right now in West Chase in Houston, one of the things that I did was I evaluated I think up to 4 schools to see, not only the instructor, the training methodology, the network. There was a number of deciding factors, which was because I travel a lot, I want to be able to continue my training while also having my attendance count. And Gracie Barra enabled me to do that. Plus, I knew I came to learn that the professor there, was very technical in terms of his teaching and whatnot. And so I figured, I have a good set of instructors. I also find that the school is very lively and hustle and bustle. There's a good community and camaraderie there. I like the sport factor. I wanted to compete. And so all of that helped me make a decision and actually eliminate other options that I was evaluating. At the end of the day, it comes down to you being clear on your short-term and long-term goals. If you're clear on that, then whatever school you look at, you'll be able to evaluate whether or not they will help you come closer to that goal. At the same time, it's a good idea to help communicate to your trainer, to your sensei, to your coach, to your professor. Hey, you know what? I just want to let you know, this is my goal, right? And because I'll give you an example, with Professor Opiano over at Gracie Barra West Chase, one of the things that he's very clear on is that he encourages people to let him know what their goal is, right? Because the expectation that he has will be based on the goal that you have as a student. And so, if somebody is like, you have no desire to compete whatsoever, I just want to train to stay fit and have fun. And so his expectation, his evaluation of the student is based on that understanding. Whereas somebody who wants to compete, it's like, well, if you want to compete, you want to win, right? And so he might even go harder and he might have higher expectations of the student that wants to compete. And in fact, he might even hold them back until they get good at particular techniques and not give them the stripe and not give them their belt until they're performing to that level when it comes to competition level. And so as a result, he'll promote people based on that expectation. And so it comes down to your goals. If you're clear on your goals, you'll be clear on whether or not a particular school and their training methodology and whatnot is right for you. So I hope that helps clarify in terms of what you want to do and what you have for your martial arts journey. Let me know if this was of help. Leave me a comment below. I'll see you soon.